But interestingly, the human brain hasn't changed much in the tens of thousands of years where we've been on Earth. We all need the same thing to develop as human beings. We need, we need the natural Earth. We need good food, and we need sleep, and we need social connection. And social connection doesn't mean virtual social connection. It means real in-person social connection. And so I think the healthiest mindset that we can have as parents is to be present with our kids. What does that mean?
Hello, healthy dads. Welcome to another Healthy Dad conversation. Today we are just absolutely stoked to have friend of the channel, Dr. Terry Lim, back, this time to talk about being a dad and medicine. We are recording here in Kirrawee on the traditional lands of the Dharawal people. I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Terry, welcome back to the channel.
Chris, it's great to be back, and I'm really happy to be talking about this topic, which is really close to my heart as a dad and a doctor myself.
So you're obviously still very busy over there at the Mindsight Clinic. You're the owner and chief operator. You've been doing some very exciting stuff in mental health, in the private field, and in GP integration into psychiatry care. But today we are talking about dadding. So I just wanted to grab your dad specs first. Can you tell me how many kids you have? How old are they?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I've got to say, being a dad is probably my second job. It's just as busy as running a practice, yes. Probably harder. To practice, you've got more control, I think. Anyway, my kids, I've got three girls. They're 16, 14, and 5. So, yeah, bit of a gap between the second and third one.
Okay. So I'm a new dad since we chatted last. We were just having a chat about that. I also have a lovely young daughter, and I'm learning to be a dad, and I'm aiming to be a good enough dad. Let's dig into dadding. Tell me what you enjoy most about being a dad.
Well, Chris, I just love the fact that I've got 3 girls. So I've got to start off with saying I never really thought I'd have this much fun being the father of daughters. I was an only child, actually, so I didn't have any siblings. So growing up with girls, it was certainly not an experience that I had growing up. And I've got to say, I didn't think I'd have much of an idea raising girls, but it's actually been mostly pretty fun. I love the way that they can talk about all sorts of things. I've got to sometimes look up my Urban Dictionary to find out what various words mean that they raise, like esche or and that kind of thing. And they tease me a lot about being a Gen Xer, a dad that's so last century. But yeah, I love the banter. I love seeing them grow. I love seeing them develop new skills and abilities. And 5-year-olds in that really rapid phase of growth at the moment, where she's learning to read and count, and it's also really interesting just comparing their personalities. I love hanging out with them. I love taking them to experience new things. I just really love being a dad.
That's great to hear, and I think that's one of the things as dads with daughters. They initially like, okay, how do I connect with my daughter? And for me, the 3-month-old daughter, I can't take her to the footy anyway, and she may love the footy anyway. Whether or not she supports the Roosters, Manly, or another team, that's all up in the air. And I would say that that's a bit of an unfair assessment of you to say that you're, not understanding the modern things, because you do have a bit of an entrepreneurial mindset, and we'll probably come back to that later. If you had to put your dad philosophy in one sentence, I know this is asking a lot, but if you need to sit with it for a sec, go for it. If you had to put your dad philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
In one sentence, or I can actually boil it down to 2 words, actually, Chris.
Okay.
As I was saying to you earlier, I haven't actually prepared anything, and really, when you were talking about dad philosophy, 2 words came to my mind, and that's be present. Be present. Everything in our world, our modern world, conspires against us being present with our kids, in our families, our spouses. More than ever before, we're living in an environment where that the competition for attention has never been higher. In the old days, as you may remember, you're probably a bit younger than me, but there was pretty much 4 channels on the telly. 3 of them probably didn't really work very well because the aerial was rubbish. And so you were left with one channel, and we thought, oh, this is rubbish, we're going to play outside. And that was it. And you play with your mates. No one had a phone. These days, it's YouTube, it's Netflix, it's everything. And then if they're not watching it on the TV, it's mobile devices. So, it's a different world we're living in. But interestingly, the human brain hasn't changed much in the tens of thousands of years where we've been on Earth. We all need the same thing to develop as human beings. We need, we need the natural Earth. We need good food, and we need sleep, and we need social connection. And social connection doesn't mean virtual social connection. It means real in-person social connection. And so I think the healthiest thing, the healthiest mindset that we can have as parents is to be present with our kids. And what does that mean? It means, it's only 2 words, Chris, but it means so much. Be, the word be is to exist. Often we don't exist in the present. We're often existing through the lives of other people on social media. We're existing in the future, thinking about the things that we've got to do tomorrow, or the good things that are coming up, the bad things that we've got to fix. And we're often living in the past as well. It could be the past of just yesterday, what I did right and wrong, or it could be the past that comes back to us, from many, many years ago. And then we can also, so being present and being alive in the moment, is that first step toward being present. And then present is about the here and now. And about giving your children your undivided attention. Even if they're on the phone. I actually noticed something interesting about my teenagers. Is that when I sit next to them, say at the dinner table or something, and they're on their phones, the temptation is to say, "Hey guys, get off your phones and let's eat dinner, or let's talk, or something." Usually, when I say that, the last thing they want to do is get off their phones. But what I've actually discovered a little trick, right? If I sit next to them and I don't have my phone, and then I just sit there and I kind of just look at them, after a while, they'll kind of turn over and they'll notice that I'm there. And then usually they'll put their phone down and they'll go,
That's
"Hey,
interesting.
Dad,
I like
what do you
that.
think about this? What do you think about that?" And it's actually works for the extrovert, and it works for my introvert as well. The 5-year-old hasn't quite got there because she's more interested in watching, Bluey or something on the iPad. But it's really interesting with my teens, actually, that little trick has been really helpful for me.
I like that, and I think it comes back to the idea of building that rapport with your kids, because I'm not an expert. I'm just going off what I listen to on podcasts, but the rapport with your kids is supposedly built up every day. It's not a big sudden action. It's every day being present with them.
Yeah,
So that when something big does happen, when they're worried about something like bullying or drugs,
that's right.
they have that rapport and that connection. They know they can talk to you.
That's right.
So I think
That's right.
that's so important to be present. And you're right. Like I'm talking to someone later in the week about internet gaming disorder, or various screen addiction problems, and we've never had more issues with that.
Yes.
I do worry for my kids in the future and how they will be able to fight against the programming and the multi-billion dollar industry that is designed to keep them hooked on their phones, or to keep them engaged in gaming or some other disorder. And that's from someone who was a gamer. I played offline gaming and a few other things growing up, perhaps showing my age as well. But it is an area of concern, and certainly I think in medicine there are a few areas of interest in all these gaming disorders and screen disorders. I'll jump ahead for a sec. If you had to tell me something that you learned either while you were training or while you were working as a doctor about how to navigate the healthcare system for you, your family. Is there anything you identified that because you were a doctor, it made it easier to be a dad, or was there just nothing that really prepared you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. When I first signed up for psychiatry training, my wife was pregnant with our first, and actually, in my first week as a registrar, she gave birth. So I had to apply for paternity leave virtually on week 2 of my first rotation as a registrar. And I remember talking to some other psychiatrist colleagues and consultants at the time. And this is after about maybe 6 months of having a baby and juggling work and everything. And us, in psychiatry, you start reading about healthy human development and all the things that can go wrong. You sort of see a lot of people with trauma and difficulties of early development landing in ED, and you sort of build up this kind of worst case scenario. And I said, oh, look, I'm just a bit sort of anxious about raising a kid that's going to be healthy. And I think the best advice I got actually, and it alludes to what you actually said right at the start of the interview when you talked about your goal of being a good enough dad. Most of them said to me, Terry, if you can be a good enough dad, you don't have to worry. If you can provide a good enough environment, you don't have to worry. And that took a lot of pressure off. And I think there's only so much that we can do as parents. What have I learned in medicine? I guess that's the biggest thing I tell my patients, is that we don't aim for perfection. Is that we aim to be good enough, and good enough can mean lots of things. But good enough doesn't mean that we stop developing and growing. I'm really a big advocate of the growth mindset. The growth mindset believes that everybody can change and grow, unless they decide not to. So if you have a choice, or if you decide that you want to grow, then you will. And even the concept of mindful parenting, that's a pretty new concept actually. It's developed because of the environment we live in. Parents were by definition mindful because they didn't have to worry about social media and games and stuff. But these days we have to be conscious of that. So I've got a lot out of the psychology world, and so I think it's a big failing in psychiatry training that we don't get enough training in psychology, in human psychology. The training program would be about 10 years if we added everything we needed to know, but I think there needs to be a bit more in there about human psychology, understanding healthy development, the role of trauma in people's lives. The thing I love about the understanding of human development is the importance of attachment. The importance of how a child attaches to their mum and dad from the various earliest ages. So this is the time, Chris, where, as I said, if you can be present, they're the building blocks of a great future parent-child relationship. And no matter what happens, your child will always remember that, and always remember you taking her to the footy, even at 3 months.
So that actually answers my next question quite nicely as well, which was, did you get paternity leave? Because it's a hot topic in GP land at the moment, is paid parental leave.
Right.
And it sounds like you were able to get some paternity leave by the sound.
I got a week. I got 1 week, Chris.
Oh, you got a week. Okay.
A week. That's all. I think I could have gotten a little bit more, but because I just see what happened was I actually dropped out of New South Wales Health for a while to locum and do a few things, and I discovered psychiatry through locuming. And so when I signed up for the program, I didn't have much leave actually up my sleeve because I'd sort of resigned from New South Wales Health. So unfortunately, I only had 1 week. So that was pretty challenging. And fortunately, we had some family help and stuff at the time. So it was good, but it was certainly very challenging managing overtime. In those days, we were either on site overnight or being called back. So I'd be called back all through the night, to drive from where I was living out to Mount Druitt and all sorts of places. So it was a pretty full-on experience. I'm glad I was younger then. That was about 15, 16, 17 years ago. So I'm glad I did it then. not now. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, look, paternity leave is so important. I mean, yeah, it's great that mothers get leave, but fathers are just as important to a child's development as a mother. So,
How do you stay healthy as a dad? You know, obviously it's mental, it's physical, and there's an
yeah.
overlap between the two. But do you have any tips or tricks for the dads out there how to keep healthy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I think about health, I think about this sort of health as being a global concept. You know, it's not just
Mm,
physical health; it's also
mm,
emotional health, mental health, spiritual health. So um, I think it's about being aware of yourself to start with, and again, it's that idea of being present, but not just being present with your children, but being present with yourself. Recognizing when you're starting to feel burnt out or resentful or tired or you're losing motivation. Sometimes when I lack that compassion for my patients, I kind of recognize that, and they sort of maybe start to annoy me, or I start to switch off halfway through a conversation, something like that. Those are little warning signs for me that I need to just evaluate where I'm at. So I think the first thing is to be able to come up with a system or the ability to be aware of yourself, your physical state, your emotional state, your mental state. Because if you can't be aware of yourself, you won't know how to help yourself, if that makes sense. And everybody's different. So, as men in particular, we're not often trained or taught how to express our emotions and how to admit when we need help. Right? It's a big thing in masculinity. Um, I really love the concept of vulnerable leadership or vulnerable masculinity, where by being vulnerable, you can lead and be a more effective person. So I think if men in particular, if people have difficulty being aware of that, it's great to have a psychologist, a great GP, a good friend, just to check in with once in a while and say, hey, this has been going on, and what do you reckon? So that's really the first step, and I think most people, if they can get that, they'll be able to kind of work out something. Um, I guess the second thing is just remembering all the things that the primate brain needs to flourish. Right? We need sunlight, we need good food, we need good sleep, we need regular physical activity, and we need good social connections. Like, it's not rocket science, but
mm.
in this day and age, even the most basic things seem like rocket science. And I tell people you need 8 hours of sleep. Unfortunately, it's a biological reality, and they go, "You're kidding me." I say, "Well, it's not my job to tell you what to do, but it's my job to tell you how your brain works. Your brain's not going to work very well if you don't get a decent amount of sleep. Full stop." So I would just say it's just really basic. You don't need to run marathons. You don't need to cycle 300 kilometers a week. Just the basics: move your body, get outside, eat well, have some good social connections to start with.
I think that's a good foundation. And I have noticed the days where I have less sleep or I don't get a 10-15 minute hit workout in. Um, I have found that taking the baby for a pram walk or early in the morning, getting that exercise makes a world of difference to my day. And you're right, identifying those signs of burnout, the reduction in empathy, everyone's sign is different, but having a plan in place so you know those signs and can recognize when your tank
That's
needs
right.
topping up, very important.
Mm.
I think one of the questions I've been asking to people, and this is, uh, getting towards the end of the interview, is do you have a really good dad joke? And if you don't, we're happy for you to come back to us with a prepared one later. But do you have a very good dad joke that you'd like to share with the audience?
Chris, that's the one I was actually putting in my diary to prepare for. Unfortunately, I don't. But there is, um, there's old chestnut when someone says, I'm tired or I'm hungry," and you go, "Hi, hungry. I'm Terry," and they do a big groan. But no, I'm. Yeah.
Actually, that's
I'll have to
interesting.
come
Grab
back to you
that
on
for
a
a
good
sec.
dad joke.
Because you can send me a dad joke and I'll post it after the
Sure.
episode. But there's the idea of, I don't know if you can do any Tony Robbins stuff, but the idea of saying, I am hungry versus I feel hungry. That's interesting. And the
Right.
dad joke actually does cut that off at that thought
It
process. I'd
it
never really
does. It
considered that
does.
angle, but that's
It
interesting.
does. Although acknowledging you're hungry is probably not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So look, we'll have to wrap up soon. We've got clinic, both of us. Is there anything else you wanted to say to our audience? Obviously, you can tell us a little bit about the Mindsight Clinic and what you're doing there. That'd be a good topic for people to hear about. But is there anything else you wanted to share with the dads or the patients out there?
Chris, I would say to all the dads out there that you have the potential to really make a huge impact in the lives of your kids. Um, if you can invest in your own health and well-being, you'll be a better dad for it. Take real joy in your kids. They can be challenging. They can, poke all your buttons. At the end of the day, though, they're your little people. And if you can start early, and it's never too late to be a better dad. I'd also encourage people to look up the concept of a growth mindset. It doesn't matter if you've got adult children, young children. I believe that they can grow, and that we as dads can grow. And if you take some time to invest in yourself, it's never too late to teach an old dog new tricks.
I like that, Terry. Well, that has been a lovely Healthy Dad convo. Thank you for sharing. It's not easy sometimes as a medical dad to talk about these things, but I'm glad everyone is here having conversations. I'll let you get back to clinic. You have a great day.
Cheers, Chris.
Terry did come back to us with a dad joke. It goes as follows. I have an inferiority complex, but it's not a very good one.